It is a bit of a key day for business then. Of course, the EU summit getting underway, and we've had key leaders in this sounding off. Owen thinks we need to focus a bit on Spain.
Absolutely. Spain is the country right now in the eye of the storm, Stuart. Forget Greece for a moment. Greece is important. Spain is, of course, the country that's too big to fail, too big to save, and yet right now this country is failing. Remember, just this week alone, we've seen 28 of its banks downgraded. This country formally applying for up to 100 billion euros in emergency loans for its banks. The government says this is not a bailout, but to you and I, it looks like a bailout if a government has to go to European authorities and ask them for emergency funding to prop up their banks. More importantly, perhaps, the cost of borrowing has now shot up to what are dangerously high levels once again for this country. The Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, spelled out just how bad things were.
We can't keep funding ourselves for a long time at current prices. There are many institutions which have no access to financial markets. It happens in Spain, it happens in Italy, and it happens in other countries.
That was the Spanish Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, in Parliament. Just to put some figures on that, Stuart, him talking about Spain not being able to borrow much longer at those kind of levels. Here's why. The interest rates on 10-year borrowing for Spain, that's the benchmark for judging a country's financial health in these kind of things, touching nearly 7% in the last 24 hours. Now, it's true to say that Italy is not far behind. Italy finds itself more or less in the same boat, but it's Spain that's in real hot water right now. Remember, countries like Portugal, Ireland and Greece all had to submit to the bailout treatment once their borrowing costs hit those kind of levels.
Get out of the mess then, Owen. What's the solution?
Well, any of the solutions on the table would probably satisfy a country like Spain right now. We've heard lots of talk going into this summit about these proposals. Eurobonds, mutualising debt, the idea being to throw a collective arm around Europe and particularly around countries like Spain, so that countries like Germany, the rich northern countries, France, Germany, Finland, Austria, you name it, they will all be able to say, we stand behind this country and we'll guarantee your debts. That's pretty much what the Spanish are looking for right now, and the Italians, which is why they've been ramping up the language and saying we have to have some kind of fix before the markets open on Monday morning. For them, it's all about trying to get market confidence back into these countries so that the markets will give them a little bit of breathing space and reduce their borrowing costs.
So fundamental differences out in the open before this summit, and yet world markets, I mean, they seem to be kind of okay with that, which is bizarre. Again,
well, let's face it, how many of these summits have we seen now? Nearly 20 in the past 2 years, where the markets rally before and then get very disappointed with the outcome. But we'll have to take these on face value for the time being. Let's look at the Asian markets trading, as Stuart says, very much in the green this Thursday. Just the Shanghai Composite losing a little bit of ground. The Nikkei up by around 1.5%. Similar kind of story, a bit more muted on the US markets on Wednesday. Let's bring you the numbers at the close of play on Wall Street. There they are for you, around about 1/3% up or so.
Now next, a record fine for Barclays. The UK bank has been punished heavily for a scam, in fact, that left millions of savers paying over the odds on their loans. As William Edwards reports, the settlement is likely to be the first as some of the biggest names in banking are drawn into what's alleged to be an international fraud.
Mention the Libor and Euribor rates, and most banking customers won't know what you're talking about. But the system that Barclays tried to manipulate for its own profit directly affects the price of everything from credit cards to corporate loans.
That average is what drives the interest rates paid by hundreds of millions of people on their own mortgages, small businesses on their loans, student loans, insurance products. It affects a hugely diverse range of financial transactions globally, not just in the UK.
For at least 5 years, bankers submitted false figures to try and alter the rates in their favour. Regulators have now given Barclays one of the largest fines in banking history. In the US, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission announced a $200 million penalty. This is on top of fines of $160 million from the US Department of Justice and around $93 million from the UK's Financial Services Authority. That all adds up to $453 million. The bank's chief executive, Bob Diamond, was running one of the departments involved at the time and has waived his bonus this year. But Barclays might just be the tip of the iceberg, as other banks are still under investigation for similar misconduct.
It's deeply depressing. In fact, this particular story is both large, appalling and shocking. What we're talking about here is what appears to have been manipulation of markets between more than one bank. There'll probably be other banks that will come into purview over all this.
More than 20 other banks worldwide will now be nervously awaiting the regulator's next move.
Okay, let's pick up on one or two more of the day's business headlines for you now, starting with News Corp, whose board has approved a plan to split Rupert Murdoch's empire in half. That's according to Bloomberg sources. It'll mean separating publishing from the entertainment division that includes lucrative brands like the 20th Century Fox movie studio and Sky pay-per-view TV. Murdoch has been under pressure from shareholders to isolate his underperforming newspapers in the wake of last year's UK phone hacking scandal.
And Airbus is looking at opening its first factory in the US. Reuters says the France-based plane maker wants to build its best-selling A320 jet on US turf in direct competition with rival Boeing. The firm had planned to build mid-air refuelling planes in the US for the Army before losing a multi-billion-dollar bid to Boeing. Airbus says no decision has been taken. Now, they seem to hit the market, don't they, at the rate of one a week at the moment, talking about tablet computers, but there is real interest in Google's offering, isn't there?
They always say this, Stuart, to get us interested. But yes, you're right, we should be interested in what Google's doing, because basically it's a company that isn't really in the business of making hardware until now. Remember, it makes the things that drive other devices. We're talking about the Android platform that drives many of the world's mobile phones. This has been unveiled in the last 24 hours. They're calling it the Nexus. It's their first Google-made tablet computer. Now, it does everything that tablets does, as you can see there. You can play games on them, browse the web. You can also directly access a lot of Google content. The advantage is, with Google having bought companies like YouTube, you've got a very streamlined interface, if you like, to get you into those kind of applications. Having looked at Google's website just before we got on air, though, there were one or two users saying it looks a little bit small. The screen's about 7 inches. That's quite a lot smaller than devices like the iPad. And one or two people are saying, well, if I've got a smartphone that's got a fairly big screen, do I really want to shell out for something that's not an awful lot bigger?
Is it going to sell? That's the important question.
Well, yeah, and we've got really nothing to compare it to on the Google front compared to other companies like Apple, Samsung and so on, who've already got a little bit of form in selling these kind of devices. Google are going to sell this for around $200. Now, that makes it an awful lot cheaper than the iPad, around half the price, more on a par with companies like Amazon, who've got their own tablet computer. And again, one or two users saying, well, the quality isn't quite as good as Apple, but then it wouldn't be if it's selling for half the price. So I'm afraid it is a bit of a wait and see, but it's got an awful lot of ground to make up. I think at the last count, Apple have sold something like 120 million iPads, and this thing's only been around for, what, a year or so?
Okay, talking of Google, staying with Google really, we saw these things a little bit earlier this year, didn't we? It's the prototype of Google glasses, and they're going to hit the shops soon, is that right?
Maybe. They've got a few things to iron out on this, but Google have actually taken to the air to road test these. These are, as Stuart says, the Google glasses. Google execs took these out for a spin, a bit of skydiving fun, and they videoed what they saw as they hurtled to the ground. Google are saying they're going to roll this out, or at least sell it to software developers to let them have a bit of a play with it. It's difficult to get a price tag on this. One of Google's co-founders, Sergey Brin, said it would be around $1,500, but they're hoping to bring that price down. I think they'd have to if they're going to make this a mass market device. But it does everything. You can browse email, you can make phone calls right through these glasses. It's got a little sort of chip on the right-hand side that allows you to do all this sort of stuff. I don't know whether they throw the parachute in, but
I think all we learned there was that Google executives are completely nuts looking at that video.
Parachute not included.
Excellent. All right, Owen, thank you very much. More business from Owen Hurst, of course, around about an hour's time here on Fast Fan Cat. Stay with us.
hope he likes the hotel.
I hope she's in the mood when we get to the hotel.
We can stay in bed all day.
Hit the gym early.
Get a couples massage.
Maybe play some golf.
Relax on the balcony.
And watch the game.
I hope it's romantic.
On a big screen TV.
Don't just hope. Know what you're really booking when you book. AccorHotels.com.